The Baldwin Railroad Monitor. The Baldwin Railroad Monitor is the machine that invented the concept of a battle train. Built in April 1861 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, it was a converted baggage car, sheathed in half an inch of boilerplate over 2.5 inches of oak planking, fitted with a 24-pounder howitzer on a swivel mount and 50 loopholes cut into its sides for riflemen. It carried approximately 50 men and was pushed ahead of an unarmored locomotive to clear Confederate ambushes and protect bridge repair crews on the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad. The swivel mount allowed the howitzer to cover the front arc, or the full length of either side, which was a significant tactical advantage in linear track combat. The weakness the Monitor could never solve was its engine. Push the armored car you would, the locomotive behind it remained unarmored and exposed, and a single Confederate gunner who put a shot through the boiler turned the whole assembly into a stationary target in the middle of hostile territory. Both Union and Confederate forces built variations on the concept throughout the war, but the heavier the artillery became on both sides, the less protection a layer of iron plate provided. The RT-23 Molodets. The RT-23 Molodets, known to NATO as the SS-24 Scalpel, is the most destructive weapon ever placed on a train. Each 9-car Soviet set carried a 3-stage solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile weighing 104.5 metric tons, armed with 10 independently targetable nuclear warheads, each with a yield of 550 kilotons and capable of reaching targets 10,000 to 11,000 kilometers away. From the outside, a Molodets train was indistinguishable from a standard refrigerated freight car, which was the entire point. The Soviet rail network stretched 145,000 kilometers, and Western satellites tracking the system could not determine which refrigerated train was carrying 10 nuclear warheads and which was carrying frozen fish. To fire, the train stopped wherever it happened to be on the route. Technicians shorted the overhead power lines to prevent arcing. The roof of the missile car slid open. A gas generator ejected the 100-ton canister 20 to 30 meters into the air, and the missile's engine ignited only after it was clear of the train to prevent the exhaust from destroying the launch platform. The missile also used an inflatable nose cone to fit within standard car dimensions. The Molodets could survive a nuclear detonation 500 meters away and retaliate within minutes, which converted the entire Soviet civilian rail network into an invisible and dispersed missile silo. PP-53 Smialy. The PP-53 Smialy, meaning bold, was the most combat-effective armored train ever fielded in conventional warfare, and it proved its reputation on the first morning of the Second World War. The Polish Second Republic built its armored train doctrine around the concept of a mobile naval squadron on land, and Smialy was its fullest expression. The train was an integrated combat unit. Artillery wagons, each carrying a 100mm howitzer and a 75mm gun, an assault wagon housing an infantry platoon and radio equipment, an armored locomotive with a commander's cupola, and light tankettes loaded onto ramp cars that could be driven off the train to pursue infantry beyond the track line. Empty platforms were placed at each end to trigger mines before the locomotive reached them. At the Battle of Mokra on September 1, 1939, Smialy halted in the middle of the advancing German 4th Panzer Division and engaged at close range. Its guns were mounted higher than the turrets of German PZ-I and PZ-2 tanks and could hit targets from 2.5 kilometers, a distance at which the early German tank guns were ineffective. The train was never hit by a direct bomb during the September campaign, because a train in constant motion was a difficult target for high-altitude aircraft to lead accurately. Smialy served under 4 different flags before it was finally abandoned when the crew ran out of ammunition and the surrounding infantry collapsed entirely. Schwerer Gustav. Schwerer Gustav is the largest and heaviest artillery piece ever used in combat, and it required a train to move because nothing else on land could carry it. Built by Krupp and weighing 1,350 metric tons, it fired shells weighing 7,100 kilograms from an 800mm barrel, 32.5 meters long, reaching targets 47 kilometers away. It was so large that it required 2 parallel sets of tracks to support its weight, and a 4-track configuration at the firing site to accommodate the overhead gantry cranes needed to assemble it. Assembling Gustav took between 3 and 6 weeks, required 500 men to operate the gun itself, and demanded an additional 2,000 to 2,500 personnel to lay track, build embankments, and staff 2 dedicated anti-aircraft battalions positioned around it. Its rate of fire was approximately 1 round every 30 to 45 minutes. In its only combat use, at the Siege of Sevastopol in June 1942, it successfully destroyed an underground ammunition magazine buried under 30 meters of seawater and 10 meters of concrete. Across its entire operational life, it fired 48 combat rounds. It cost 7 million Reichsmarks, demanded an entire artillery division to function, and the logistical weight of moving and protecting it consumed resources that produced almost no tactical return at that scale of investment. The Type 95 Soki. The Type 95 Soki was a tank that could also function as a train, built by the Imperial Japanese Army for operations across the vast rail networks of Manchuria and Burma. It was constructed on the chassis of the Type 95 Hago light tank and fitted with retractable flanged wheels that could be lowered onto standard gauge track. On the ground, it moved at 30 kilometers per hour. On rails, it reached 72 kilometers per hour. Converting between modes took between 1 and 3 minutes. The Soki was adjustable for narrow, standard, and broad gauge track, which meant it could operate across the varied rail infrastructure of the territories Japan occupied. It carried no fixed heavy weapons, relying on the rifles and machine guns of its 6-man crew. The tactical logic was that if the Sokai encountered a destroyed bridge or a section of sabotaged track, the crew could lift the vehicle off the rails, drive around the obstruction on its tracks, and rejoin the line on the other side. A traditional armored train could be stopped permanently by a single removed rail. The Soki could not be trapped that way. It functioned as a reconnaissance and anti-partisan vehicle, and between 1935 and 1943, approximately 110 were produced and deployed across occupied China, Manchuria, and Southeast Asia. The Zamoretz. The Zamoretz was the most well-traveled armored vehicle of the early 20th century, and its journey across the Eurasian landmass is a record of how completely the political geography of an entire continent collapsed. Built in 1916 at the Odessa rail yards, it was powered by 2 Italian Fiat gasoline engines rather than steam, which gave it a lower profile and eliminated the smoke plume that signaled the approach of most armored trains. Its armor ran from 12 to 16 millimeters of rolled steel. It carried 2 76mm guns in fully rotating 360-degree turrets and between 8 and 12 Maxim machine guns, plus searchlights, rangefinders, periscopes, and an internal intercom system. It began service as a Russian Imperial anti-aircraft platform, was seized by Bolsheviks in early 1918, captured by the Czechoslovak Legion in July of the same year, and renamed Orlik, passed to White Russian forces after the Legion evacuated, and eventually reached the service of Chinese warlord Jiang Zongchang as train number 105. The Imperial Japanese Army captured it in Manchuria in 1931, after which it disappears from the historical record, almost certainly scrapped for its steel. In 15 years, it crossed approximately 15,000 miles of contested territory and served 5 different armies. No other armored vehicle of the First World War era changed hands as many times or moved as far. The Zheleznyakov. The Zheleznyakov was a Soviet armored train that fought the German army for 8 months during the Siege of Sevastopol, using the railway tunnels carved into the limestone hills of the Crimean Peninsula as mobile bunkers. Manned by sailors from the Black Sea Fleet, the train carried 4 76mm naval guns, 4 120mm mortars, 2 76mm anti-aircraft guns, and 24 Maxim machine guns, protected by 20mm steel plates, reinforced with sandbags. Its tactic was to remain hidden inside a tunnel during German air patrols, emerge when target coordinates were radioed in, fire its full armament, and reverse back into the tunnel before German counter-battery fire could be ranged or Stuka bombers could be directed to its position. German troops stationed near Sevastopol named it the Green Ghost because it appeared, fired, and vanished. It completed over 140 combat sorties by this method. The Germans could not destroy it while it moved, so they eventually targeted the tunnels themselves. On June 26, 1942, a concentrated Luftwaffe raid collapsed the entrance to the Trinity Tunnel while the Zheleznyakov was inside. The sailors who survived the collapse reportedly dismantled the train's undamaged guns and continued using them in the city's defense until the final surrender weeks later. The German BP-42. The German BP-42 was the Wehrmacht's answer to the vast and hostile geography of the Eastern Front, and it was designed around a single operational reality: a train on a single track must be able to fight with equal effectiveness in either direction without being turned around. The armored locomotive sat at the dead center of the formation, with an identical arrangement of fighting cars extending outward in both directions. Each end of the train held an empty control platform to trigger mines before the locomotive reached them, followed by a flat car carrying a ramp and a tank, usually a Panzer 38T or a captured French vehicle, which could be driven down to pursue enemies who had moved away from the track. Artillery cars mounted a 20mm quad anti-aircraft gun alongside a light howitzer. The command cars carried over 130 infantry and the radio equipment necessary for coordinating operations across hundreds of kilometers of contested line. The 1944 BP-44 update added a dedicated tank hunting car, mounting a Panzer IV turret with a long 75mm anti-tank gun, specifically to destroy Soviet armor. Before this upgrade, battle trains had been equipped for indirect fire support. The BP-44 was the first purpose-built configuration in which destroying enemy tanks was the primary function of a single car. The Krajina Express. The Krajina Express was built by railroad workers in the town of Kanin in 1991, using a General Motors diesel locomotive and whatever flatbed cars and weapons were available. And over 4 years, it became the most combat-tested improvised armored train in modern history. It began with sandbags, 20mm anti-aircraft guns, and AT-3 Sagar anti-tank missiles. By 1992, it had 25mm steel plate, Soviet 76mm field guns, and 120mm mortars. By 1993, its crew had integrated the complete turret from an American M18 Hellcat tank destroyer onto the front car, giving it a high-velocity 76mm gun with electro-hydraulic traverse that was technically superior to any factory-built train gun of the same period. After crew members were killed by wire-guided missiles, the sides of the wagons were wrapped in canvas and thick rubber sheets with a 30 to 50mm gap filled with gravel between the outer rubber and the steel plate. This improvised composite armor proved effective at dissipating anti-tank missile warheads during the siege of Baihak. The crew also used the train for offensive rail bomb missions, pushing freight cars loaded with 3.5 tons of explosives into enemy tunnels. In August 1995, surrounded during Operation Storm, the crew derailed the train into a ravine rather than allow it to be captured. The Taeyangho. The Taeyangho, meaning sun, is the only active armored command train operated by a head of state in the world today. Used by Kim Jong-un for domestic and international travel, it moves at a maximum speed of between 37 and 60 kilometers per hour, because the armored plating across its more than 20 carriages makes the train too heavy to run faster. It carries bulletproof windows, explosion-proof flooring, satellite communications, internet terminals, a war room lined with dark wood paneling, an emergency helicopter, and 2 armored Mercedes limousines. Its defensive weapons include mounted mortars, anti-tank missiles, and anti-aircraft systems. The Taeyangho operates as part of a 3-train convoy, a lead security train that sweeps the track for explosives and checks conditions ahead, the leadership train at the center, and a rear security train carrying additional personnel and support staff. It moves primarily at night. For a leader who cannot use a conventional aircraft without exposure to interception, the armored train with a dedicated sweep team clearing the route provides a level of protection that no other form of transport replicates. The track can be inspected, the perimeter can be controlled, and the entire structure can absorb direct fire that would destroy an armored road vehicle. The Taeyangho is the living endpoint of a category of machine that began with a baggage car and a howitzer in Philadelphia in 1861.